Today, we uncover the shocking truth about American whiskeys. You've probably got a bottle or two sitting on your shelf right now. And why wouldn't you? It's one of the great pleasures of American drinking culture. Some grain, some oak, some thyme. What on earth could go wrong? As it turns out, quite a lot. In fact, almost everything. Let's start with something that applies to virtually every whiskey brand you've ever bought in this country. And I guarantee most of you have never noticed it. The TTB, the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau, the federal agency that approves every American whiskey label, does not require brands to disclose where their whiskey actually comes from. Not on the label, not in the marketing, nowhere. A company can source every single drop from one massive industrial distillery in Indiana, bottle it somewhere else entirely, and wrap it in a label referencing a founding family, a specific region, and a recipe passed down through generations. All of that is completely legal. The label approval process does not fact-check marketing stories, and here is where it gets worse. One single distillery in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, MGP Ingredients, produces whiskey that ends up in bottles carrying hundreds of different brand names. Hundreds. Different labels, different founding stories, different price points, all sharing the same source liquid. When you know that, the craft whiskey aisle at your local liquor store looks very different the next time you walk through it. Then there is the small batch problem. There is no legal definition for small batch whiskey in the United States. None. The TTB has never established minimum or maximum batch size requirements for the term. A conglomerate producing 400,000 cases a year can stamp small batch across every single bottle and face zero regulatory challenge. It is a marketing phrase doing the work of a quality signal it was never required to earn. And then there is the flavored whiskey situation, which might be the most brazen of all. Brands are launching honey, apple, cinnamon, peach, and peanut butter expressions. Products the TTB classifies as specialty items or liqueurs rather than whiskey, because the added sugar and flavoring compounds legally disqualify them from the whiskey category. But they carry the same brand names. They sit in the same section of the store. They're priced like whiskey. And the people buying them often have absolutely no idea that what they're holding isn't legally classified as the thing it's pretending to be. So we've gone through the major whiskey brands on American shelves, dug into the sourcing records, the federal labeling laws, the court documents, and the marketing claims. And we're naming the 9 brands you need to know about before you spend another dollar. Then, at the end, we'll tell you which American whiskeys are actually worth your money and your trust. But before we do that, I need to ask you something. If what I've just told you in the last 60 seconds has already changed the way you're thinking about the bottle on your shelf, imagine what the rest of this video contains. And think about the people in your life who have no idea any of this is happening. They're buying these bottles every week. They're recommending them to friends. They're paying a craft premium for a product whose entire identity was assembled in a marketing meeting. The corporations behind these brands are counting on the fact that nobody is going to make a video like this. They are counting on your slunchwoods. So the single most powerful thing you can do right now before we go any further is hit the like button and hit it hard. Every like, every share, every subscription pushes this in front of more people. It takes this information out of the hands of the people who want it buried and puts it in front of drinkers who deserve to know what is actually in their glass. You are not just watching a video. You are part of something. So please do it now. Number 9. Fireball Cinnamon Whiskey. Fireball is everywhere. Behind every bar in America, in every college dorm, at every tailgate. The bottle is recognizable. The dragon is unmistakable. And when most people reach for it, they believe. because nothing on the front of that bottle tells them otherwise, that they are drinking American whiskey. Here is the first problem: they are not. The base spirit in Fireball is Canadian whiskey, imported from Canada before Sazerac Company adds the cinnamon flavoring and sweetener. The TTB classifies it as a specialty product because those additions disqualify it from the legal definition of whiskey. Every bottle in the whiskey aisle is not legally whiskey by American standards. It is a flavored import, positioned and priced as something it is not. And that is not even the part that should stop you. In 2014, Finland, Norway, and Sweden recalled Fireball products for containing propylene glycol, a compound used in antifreeze, at levels exceeding European food safety limits. The defense was not that it shouldn't be in there, just that the American formulation contained less. American shelves were unaffected, sales kept climbing. The longer damage Fireball has done to American whiskey culture is the one nobody talks about. It calibrated an entire generation's expectations around industrial sweetness and made real whiskey, with its complexity, its dryness, its earned warmth, feel like a step down. That is not a gateway product. That is a dead end dressed in bar signage. Number 8. Basil Hayden's. Basil Hayden's is positioned as the sophisticated entry point into premium bourbon. The tall, slender bottle with its layered paper label and woven detailing signals refinement from across the room. The name references Meredith Basil Hayden Sr., an 18th century Kentucky farmer who supposedly pioneered a higher rye content in his mash. The price, around $40 to $45 at retail, places it firmly in the premium tier alongside bottles that have spent 7, 8, and 9 years in oak. The age on the core expression is 4 years. 4. Knob Creek, its stablemate in Jim Beam's own small batch collection, spends 9 years in the barrel. Baker's spends 7. Booker's is aged 6 to 8 years and bottled at cask strength. Basil Hayden's sits alongside all of them at a premium price, with a quarter of the aging time and the lowest bottling proof in the entire category. 80 proof, the legal minimum for bourbon. Less time in wood and minimum proof means less flavor development, lower production cost, and significantly higher margins. The bottle is not signaling what is inside. It is compensating for it. In 2014, Beam Inc. was acquired by Suntory Holdings, a Japanese beverage conglomerate, for $16 billion. Basil Hayden's, sold as the refined face of Kentucky bourbon heritage, is a product managed entirely by a Japanese corporation's global portfolio team. The name on the bottle reaches back to the 18th century. The company making the decisions reaches back to Osaka. 4 years old, 80 proof, $45. The bottle is doing all of the heavy lifting. Number 7. Pendleton Whiskey. Look at a Pendleton bottle and you will know exactly what it is selling you. The bucking bronco, the rodeo palette. The name lifted directly from the Pendleton Roundup, the legendary Oregon rodeo that has run without interruption since 1910. Every visual element of this brand points at the American West, at frontier identity, at something rugged, authentic, and rooted in Pacific Northwest soil. The whiskey inside is Canadian, sourced from Alberta distillers, imported into Hood River, Oregon, and bottled by Hood River distillers. That is disclosed in the fine print. But here is what the fine print does not tell you. The Pendleton Roundup Rodeo Committee has no ownership stake in this whiskey, no role in production, no say in what goes in the bottle. They receive a licensing fee. Hood River distillers rented a century-old rodeo's name, applied it to Canadian whiskey, and left the drinker to fill in the rest. The product delivers what blended Canadian whiskey reliably delivers: light, inoffensive, and almost completely without character. A mild grain sweetness, a brief vanilla note, and a finish that disappears before you have registered it started. The rodeo is real. The frontier is real. The Canadian whiskey inside does not care about any of it. Number 6. Jack Daniel's Tennessee Honey. Jack Daniel's is the most recognized American whiskey brand on earth. The distillery in Lynchburg has operated since 1866. The Lincoln County process, charcoal filtering every drop through 10 feet of sugar maple charcoal before it touches a barrel, has been part of every bottle for over a century. That heritage is real, and it has earned a level of consumer trust that most spirits brands can only watch from a distance. Under TTB classification, Tennessee Honey is a specialty product, a blend of Jack Daniel's Tennessee whiskey and a honey liqueur. The honey flavoring and added sweetener legally remove it from the whiskey category, but it sits in the Jack Daniel's section of every liquor store in America, packaged as a direct line extension of the core product, priced as whiskey and sold to people who trust the Jack Daniel's name and have no idea the product they are handing money over for is not, by federal definition, whiskey. Brown-Forman identified consumers who found straight whiskey too challenging and engineered Tennessee Honey specifically to capture them, not by making whiskey more approachable, but by replacing the whiskey with something else while keeping the name. Anyone who picks this up as an introduction to Jack Daniel's walks away with a false impression of what that name has always stood for. Brown-Forman spent 150 years building the most trusted name in American whiskey. Tennessee Honey is what they decided to spend that trust on. Number 5. Seagram's 7 Crown. Seagram's 7 has been part of the American bar since 1934. The 7 and 7, Seagram's 7 over ice with ginger ale, became shorthand for an entire era of American casual drinking. That kind of cultural embedding is worth hundreds of millions of dollars in marketing that no brand ever has to spend. Here is what most of those people have never known about what they were drinking. Federal standards of identity require blended American whiskey to contain only 20% straight whiskey by volume. 20%. The remaining 80% can be neutral grain spirit, essentially unaged, unflavored vodka, supplemented with coloring agents and flavoring additives. The minimum actual whiskey content required by law in your bottle of Seagram 7 is 1/5. The rest is filler the label is under no obligation to explain. But there is something else. The Seagram's company no longer exists. After a catastrophic series of acquisitions in the late 1990s, the company was broken up and sold in 2000. The Seagram's 7 trademark passed through multiple ownership structures and today operates as an independent brand under contract production. The American institution that millions of people drink out of loyalty and habit is a name owned by a company most of those people have never heard of, attached to a product that is 80% not what it claims to be. The institution exists entirely in the name. The name is all that is left. Number 4. Templeton Rye. In 2015, Templeton Rye settled a class action lawsuit for $7.75 million. The lawsuit alleged that the brand's foundational marketing story, that their whiskey was produced from a Prohibition-era recipe developed in tiny Templeton, Iowa, the same recipe allegedly favored by Al Capone himself, was a fiction constructed for commercial purposes. The actual whiskey had been sourced from MGP in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, using a standard industrial rye mash bill with no documented connection to Iowa, to Prohibition, to the 1920s, or to Alphonse Capone. $7.75 million. That is the number a court put on a marketing story that was not true. The Iowa small-town story, the Prohibition romance, the gangster mythology, all of it was marketing copy rather than documented history. And it worked for years because the TTB's label approval process does not verify founding stories. Consumers were paying $40 to $45 per bottle for MGP product that other, more honest labels were selling for $20. After the settlement, Templeton invested in their own Iowa distillery and revised some language. But the original offense reveals how the craft spirits boom was systematically exploited, A compelling narrative, professionally rendered, can be worth more than actual craft for years before anyone reads the receipts. The Al Capone story was not true. The Iowa Prohibition recipe was not true. And the TTB's label approval process, which verified none of it, was working exactly as it was designed to. Number 3. WhistlePig 10-year. When WhistlePig launched in 2010, it seemed to represent everything the craft spirits movement was promising. A converted 500-acre farm in Shoreham, Vermont. A rye-forward philosophy as its defining identity. And at the helm, David Pickerell, who spent 14 years as master distiller at Maker's Mark. The story was compelling enough that WhistlePig immediately commanded $60 to $70 per bottle in a market where comparable rye whiskeys were half that. Here is what none of that story mentioned. The whiskey inside the 10-year was 100% sourced from Alberta distillers in Canada. For the brand's entire early history, the years that built its reputation established its pricing and created its loyal following. WhistlePig was importing Canadian rye whiskey and selling it under a Vermont farm identity with no disclosure of that sourcing on the bottle or in the brand's public communications. The farm was real. The packaging was real. The story connecting the liquid to Vermont craft production was not. When the sourcing became broadly known through investigative journalism rather than any voluntary disclosure from the brand, the response was largely to continue. WhistlePig has since built its own distillery and incorporated Vermont distilled spirit into newer expressions, but the 10-year, still the flagship, still the product the brand's name was built on, remains Canadian rye whiskey. At $70 or above, you are paying a Vermont craft premium for a liquid that last touched Vermont when it arrived on an import truck. Number 2. Bulleit Bourbon. The Bulleit story is one of the most carefully constructed brand narratives in American spirits. Augustus Bulleit, a Louisville tavern owner, developed his high rye bourbon recipe in the 1830s before mysteriously disappearing during a whiskey shipment around 1860. His fate never recorded, still unknown. His great-great-grandson Tom Bulleit recovered the recipe and relaunched the brand in 1987. The Frontier bottle, sloping amber glass, copper foil label reinforces every element of that heritage. It works. Bulleit is one of the most recognizable bourbon bottles in the country. Bulleit is owned by Diageo, the largest spirits company in the world, the corporation behind Johnnie Walker, Guinness, Tanqueray, Smirnoff, Captain Morgan, and dozens of others. For much of Bulleit's commercial life, the whiskey was produced under contract at other distilleries, specifically at Four Roses, rather than any Bulleit-owned facility. The Frontier family narrative was doing its work in front of a Diageo balance sheet the whole time. The quality of the liquid is not the issue. Bulleit is a competently made bourbon with a high rye mash bill that delivers genuine spice. But what the brand charges you for beyond the whiskey is the Bulleit family story, and that story became significantly more complicated in 2017 when Tom Bulleit's daughter Hollis filed a wrongful termination lawsuit against Diageo. The Frontier family story on that bottle belongs entirely to a corporation with a $25 billion market cap. It is a beautiful story. Diageo owns it. Number 1. Michters. Michters carries one of the most powerful heritage claims in American whiskey. Their marketing references 1753, positioning a Pennsylvania farmhouse distillery as one of the oldest whiskey operations on American soil. The implication, sometimes made explicit, is that Michters represents a continuous lineage of production stretching back before the country itself existed, a whiskey older than the Republic. Here is what actually happened. The original distillery, which operated under the names Schenck's, Bomberger's, and eventually Michter's, closed permanently and filed for bankruptcy in 1989. The brand name was purchased at auction by an investment group with no prior distilling history. A commercial operation relaunched Michter's as a non-distiller producer, sourcing whiskey from other Kentucky distilleries, while the 1753 marketing implied a proprietary craft operation with nearly 3 centuries of expertise behind it. For years, that sourcing was not disclosed. Let that sit for a moment. The 1753 date on every Michter's bottle refers to a farmhouse in Pennsylvania that went bankrupt 36 years ago. The company currently selling you that date bought it at auction. Michter's eventually built a genuine distillery in Louisville's Chivoli neighborhood, which opened in 2015. Their current operation is real, and some of the results are legitimately good. That part deserves to be acknowledged. What has never been corrected is the pricing that the false heritage built. The standard U.S. small batch bourbon sits at roughly $55 at retail. Toasted barrel expressions push past $80. The Celebration Sour Mash sells for $4,000 a bottle. And running through all of it is the 1753 framing that connects a Louisville operation launched in the 1990s to a Pennsylvania farmhouse that has been silent since the Reagan administration. The problem is 30 years of charging a heritage premium for a heritage that was purchased at a bankruptcy auction and never meaningfully corrected even after the distillery became real. That is why it is number 1. Now let's talk about the bottles that are actually worth your money, because they exist in abundance, and the best of them do not require hunting allocations or explaining secondary market prices to your credit card statement. The brands on this list all share the same qualities. They are transparent about where their whiskey comes from. Their founding stories are documented, not assembled in a marketing meeting. They do not hide behind labeling loopholes or borrow heritage from a category they did not earn their place in. And the whiskey itself is better, noticeably, immediately better than anything on the avoid list. Once you have made the switch, going back becomes genuinely difficult because the gap is impossible to unsee. First, Old Forester. Brown-Forman's flagship bourbon has been in continuous production since 1870, the first bourbon ever sold exclusively in sealed glass bottles, a decision founder George Garvin Brown made so customers could trust the contents had not been tampered with. That instinct toward transparency is over a century old, and the brand has never needed to reinvent its origin story because it has never stopped being true. Caramel, dark fruit, and baking spice with a dry oak finish. Around $25 at retail. No allocation games, no invented heritage, just a bottle that has been exactly what it says it is since Ulysses S. Grant was president. Second, Larceny Small Batch. Heaven Hill's wheated bourbon takes the same approach Maker's Mark built its reputation on, soft winter wheat instead of rye in the mash bill, and delivers it at a price that makes the comparison almost uncomfortable. Brown sugar, butterscotch, and a smooth vanilla finish that never feels manufactured. Heaven Hill operates one of the largest aging whiskey stocks in America, with full visibility into their Kentucky distillery and sourcing. No mystery, no theater, around $30 a bottle, and it consistently outperforms that price against bottles costing twice as much. Third, New Riff Distilling. Founded in 2014 in Newport, Kentucky, New Riff built their identity around a principle that is surprisingly rare in American whiskey. They put a bottled-in bond stamp on their core expressions, which under federal law means single distillery, single season, aged at least 4 years, bottled at exactly 100 proof. No blending across sources. No creative accounting on age statements. The law itself becomes the transparency guarantee. Assertive rye spice, caramel, and fresh grain with a long, clean finish. In a category full of brands that use the law's silence to their advantage, New Riff uses the law's strictest standards as a selling point. That is a different kind of confidence entirely. Fourth, Barrell Craft Spirits. This Louisville-based company does something that should be impossible given everything we have covered today. They source whiskey from multiple distilleries and make that sourcing the entire point. Every barrel release tells you exactly where the whiskey came from, how old it is, the proof, and what cask finishing was used. The batch notes read like honest documentation, not marketing copy. No founding family legend. No frontier mythology. Barrell Craft Spirits proves that sourcing is not the problem. Hiding sourcing is the problem. When someone is honest about it, the whiskey speaks for itself. That is the full list. Geez. 9 brands to be extremely wary of and 4 that are doing things properly. The difference in your glass will be immediate. But more than that, every time you choose not to buy the brands we have covered in this video, and every time you choose one of the honest ones instead, you are sending a signal. You are using the only real power any of us has against operations this size, and that is where you spend your money. They track every purchase. They know exactly which products are being left on the shelf and why. Your buying decision is a vote, and you get to cast it every single time you walk into a liquor store. Before you go, if this video has changed how you look at the whiskey aisle, please hit the like button. It takes 2 seconds and it gets this information in front of more people who deserve to know it. Drop a comment telling us which spirit category you want us to cover next, because we are going to keep digging. The more of you who subscribe and stay with us, the more of these we can do together. Until next time, stay sharp, stay informed, and protect your pour.